Hello, everyone, and welcome to iGaming Next Weekly News Live. The Three Musketeers ride again. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Nico back for his first stream of 2023. Nico, great to see you. How have you been doing?
I've been doing great, and first of all, thanks you once again for having me. I literally thought, okay, I might have already slipped down between the cracks, but it seems like we're back on track, and the Three Musketeers are riding alongside with each other. So it's good being back, and yeah, seeing those smiles of yours in the virtual way just before eyes is giving me goosebumps. So thank you once again.
Good to have you back, Nico. Back by popular demand, the fans were kicking off that you hadn't been on so far this year. And Conor joins us as well. That's good, isn't it? How are you, Conor? All right?
I'm very well. The triumphant trio back in action, as I like to call it. Yes,
Yeah.
Perhaps there'll be a chance for a real life meeting in a couple of weeks, as you mentioned, Nico. There's a small trade show somewhere in the East End of London coming up in the next couple of weeks that people seem to be talking about quite a lot. So that's very exciting. Lots to look forward to there.
Yeah, certainly is. Will be good for a little get together. All those titles are self-appointed, I think. I'm sure the viewers probably have a different name for the three of us. But thank you to them, as always, for tuning in. Please do say hello. We appreciate your support, as always. And I must thank our sponsors, Playson, as well, before we go any further. But I've had a very busy morning, feeling a little bit rushed and woefully underprepared for this live stream, guys. So luckily, I've had 3 cups of coffee, so I reckon adrenaline will just take us right through, and it'll be a fantastic show as always. What do you reckon? Yeah, well, we'll see.
We're in safe hands. I think Nico's going to lead us in today with a bit of his classic 10 stories in 5 minutes format that he is the pioneer of. So there's lots to look forward to. We've got quite a lot to discuss. So I'm sure we're not short of talking points today, Jay. You just relax and we'll all have a good time.
Yeah, I'll come along for the ride. But no, good point, Conor. Let's kick things off with Nico's 10 and 5.
Okay, perfect. So I'll just take over. So starting with the unlicensed website visits tripled during the World Cup. New data from the Betting and Gaming Council, short BGC, shows that the 250,000 people visited black market sites in December just alone, compared to 80,000 during the same month in 2021. And there's an official statement stating while the regulated industry was going to great lengths to protect young people during the World Cup and adhering to strict regulations and promoting safer gambling, black market operators were preying on the vulnerable. Another thing which happened in the UK is UK Gambling Commission cites history of failings as In Touch Games has issued another 6.1 penalty, which we will go into more detail during our lovely and cozy 1 hour. So I will just leave this one out. MGM considers a fresh Entain bid once white paper clears in the UK air. So US gambling giant MGM Resorts is once again considering a bid to acquire its BetMGM joint venture partner Entain PLC as deal makers await for the UK gambling review to be concluded. And we will see the white paper on the Gambling Act probably in February. Another quite interesting story is Bet365 set to withdraw Massachusetts online sports betting license application. It's quite hard to get our to get more insights, as especially the boys and girls from Bet365 are very, very quiet. But there's an official statement that Bet365 confirmed on Wednesday that they are withdrawing their applications for the tethered license for mobile sports betting in Massachusetts. But unfortunately, the company has no further comment. There is a bill about to being introduced in Hawaii, which would establish state regulator to come up with iGaming regulations. Democrats in the Hawaiian legislature have introduced a bill which would establish a state body responsible for both regulating and offering gambling activities. However, the law specifically states that this would not extend to sports betting. So while New Yorkers are able to sports bet, this won't happen in Hawaii. Then Fanatics, they partnered up with Maryland's Washington Commanders on first ever retail sportsbook inside an NFL stadium. So Fanatics obviously are about to start their journey in the sports betting field. Then heading over to Texas, there's a Texas bill seeking to guarantee Kickapoo tribe the position in gambling. The bill known as the Isla del Sur Pueblo and Alabama Coushatta tribes of Texas Equal Fair Opportunity Act, which is allow both to offer electronic bingo on reservations by ensuring that they're covered by the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. Giving you some numbers, Michigan online gambling revenue reaches roughly 2 billion in 2022, which is an increase of 41%, and Nebraska casino generated more than 2.8 million in tax revenue in 2022, which is based on the casino gaming, which debuted this year and which gives us quite an outlook to sports betting, which might be regulated in Nebraska as well. And last but not least, Italy's Lottomatica eyes on an IPO in Q4 based on their core profit raising or rising up to at least 7%. So an initial public offering, which sources had told Reuters could take place in the second quarter, would help to leave behind a dry spell in the IPO market, which the market suffered in 2022 as inflation and high interest rates stoked volatility. And they already lined up and are backed with the who's who of IPO, including UniCredit, Goldman Sachs, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, and JP Morgan. So for sure, we will see a big IPO in 2023 of Lottomatica. And I'm pretty sure I just tackled down the 10 in 5.
I think you did a great job, Nico. You can take a deep breath. There's some great interesting stories in there. I think you're absolutely right to point out the dry spell in IPOs. We haven't seen one of those for a while, and the last few that we have seen, I suppose, perhaps didn't go as well as the companies might have hoped. But especially interesting to me is this prospect of some new gambling changes in Hawaii. Let us know in the comments if you'd like to see us put on iGaming Next Honolulu, and we could all go there for a nice little trip away. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, definitely have a pina colada over there. That's for sure. The one story that leapt up to me there, Nico, was the Bet365 story. You were right to flag about them withdrawing their license in Massachusetts, because if you've tuned into weekly news at all this year, you'll know that we've been talking Bet365 up quite a bit and saying that 2023 might be the time that they make a big impact in the US. So this caught me by surprise, and I asked Ryan Butler, our US editor, why they might have withdrawn, because as you said, they didn't provide much detail. And he said he's been following a lot of the Massachusetts regulatory hearings closely, and they go really in depth into the companies and the individuals behind them. Like, it's a bit of an investigation. And by the sounds of it, Bet365 just thought, actually, this probably isn't the way we want to go, because, as we know, they're relatively exposed to some grayer markets, shall we say, that might not translate particularly well in the US. So that's the talk on the grapevine, is that's why they've withdrawn their Massachusetts license application. But there was also a bit of speculation on Twitter that maybe this means they're kind of tying up with a US gaming company that already has access in Massachusetts, so there was no need for them to apply separately. But yeah, both of those are nothing but rumours, I hasten to add.
They were hiring for a few positions in the US. I think we reported on that a few weeks ago, though. So Bet365, as you mentioned, Nico, tend to keep their cards quite close to their chest and aren't always the most forthcoming with what their plans are. But sometimes find little stories like that to see that they've got a wealth of new roles going live in, I think it was in their New Jersey office.
It might be that Massachusetts was just a little bit too intrusive for their tastes compared to the other state regulators. But yeah, I think they're pretty committed to the US, as you are right to point out, Connor. All right, so we dive into our main topics for this week. And the first one is about the Gambling Commission and their kind of hardline approach to regulation and enforcement action that we saw a lot throughout last year, but it's seriously carried into this year as well, with a pretty major £6.1 million fine for InTouch Games, which is a UK licensed operator, a casino operator that runs a handful of domains in the UK. And basically, this is the third time that they've kind of fallen foul of anti-money laundering and social responsibility protection measures since 2019. Hence the kind of heavier side of the penalty. If I could just read out the quote from one of the Gambling Commission's key executives here. She said, this is Kay Roberts, Executive Director of Operations at the Gambling Commission. Considering this operator's history of failings, we expected to see significant improvement when we carried out our planned compliance assessment. Disappointingly, although many improvements had been made, there was still more to do. The £6 million fine shows that we will take escalating enforcement action where failures are repeated, and all licensees should be acutely aware of this. What are your thoughts on this? Whoever wants to go first.
I've got some thoughts, Jake. It's to me, it reads like quite a powerful statement of intent from the regulator. It's like, we're dishing out these fines for a reason, and the more you fail to come up to speed with what we're requiring of you, the heavier the fines are going to get. I think the fact that they've had increasing fines, so they've you mentioned those two fines in 2019 and 2021, I believe, that were about 2 and 3 million respectively, and this is now 6 million more. So they've shelled out something like 11 million over the last 4 years to the Gambling Commission now. And as I say, it's a strong statement of intent from the UKGC that actually, we're not taking these failings lightly, even though I think, given the details that were published, it didn't sound like the most severe failings or the most egregious examples of a lack of responsibility there. So the two examples that we were given of what the actual fines refer to was a failing to interact with a customer until 7 weeks after they had been flagged for interaction due to erratic play patterns and extended periods of play. Not good, certainly, but hardly the most galling example of irresponsible operations that we've heard in recent years. And the operator also accepted a customer's word that they earned £6,000 a month without verifying this information. That suggests perhaps someone was betting a few £1,000s a month, but it's unlikely that they were betting tens or certainly not hundreds of thousands. And so those examples sound, if I may say, relatively minor compared to some of the failings that we've heard about. And also, these brands are not especially well known in the UK. I think one of them was called Jammy Monkey. I've never heard of it. Of course, we've heard of In Touch Games being on the industry side of things, but Jammy Monkey and Dr. Slots, I mean, these are hardly household names in the UK. And yet we've seen this massive £6 million fine. I think it's a pretty powerful statement from the regulator.
Yeah, for sure. So in your mind, it's more, they're more being penalised for the repeated failures than they are the actual, severity of the failings themselves. I think that's probably a fair assessment. And yeah, we were already well aware that the Gambling Commission kind of means business this year, because on the 16th and 17th of January, they basically published two further regulatory settlements in consecutive days. The first one was against VBet, which is the kind of B2C betting arm of Bet Construct. That was 330,000 something. And then the day after, they basically hit Tony Bet with a £440,000 penalty. So yeah, not quite on the same scale. But yeah, perhaps that goes back to what you were saying, Conor. Maybe if this was a first infringement for In Touch Games, it would have been more in line with those two penalties.
Yeah, quite possibly. So it's something like 7 million they've dished out already in the first, what day are we on, 26th of January, in the first sort of less than 4 weeks of the year. And if that continues at that rate, I think there's a high chance that they'll be exceeding the amount of penalties that were dished out last year, although last year was the highest ever. They gave out £43 million worth of fines, 17, as we remember, of which were given to Entain. But yes, it looks like they're off to a flying start, and the Gambling Commission Christmas party will be very well attended this year, I'm sure.
Yes. I asked at the beginning whether you had any thoughts or opinions about this, Conor, and it turns out you had so many thoughts and opinions that you had to basically invent a brand new feature for the iGaming Next website. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Hopefully our production team can flash up the graphic now so people know what we're talking about.
Yes, welcome to Conor's Corner. This is where I come to expel all my half-baked opinions about things. There's me with my little umbrella in front of the Houses of Parliament. What got me thinking yesterday was the fact that these brands that I'd never heard of the actual brand names themselves. I thought, really, £6 million fine for Jammy Monkey? Who is that? And it sort of took me on a journey down memory lane, thinking back to my early days in the gambling industry, which is about 5 years ago now, in 2018. And I remember when I first came into gambling, the talk of the day, the talk of the town was this £1 million fine for Sky Bet. Oh my God, £1 million. It's so enormous. And I remember thinking it doesn't sound like that much. It's a lot to me, but not to Sky Bet, really. And I looked back, and actually Sky Bet, in the year that they received that £1 million fine, they generated nearly £700 million in revenue. So it was like, I think there was so my contention in this new feature that we've started was that in the past, operators in the UK would see these fines as just a part of the cost of doing business, basically. It was seen as an added tax in a sense where you would have to shell out a little bit occasionally to the Gambling Commission for bending the rules, but that you would make that money back quite comfortably by doing so. And now I think the way things are going, I think the market's changing quite a lot, and the regulator's got its claws out and it's ready to start dishing out fines and taking things a bit more seriously. And I mean, combine that with the basically non-existent growth in the UK market at the moment, pressures on customer spend and customer, disposable income and so on with the cost of living crisis, and you've got the recipe for a bit of a disastrous market at the moment, really. Definitely never been an easy market to operate in, but probably more difficult now than ever.
Yeah, that's true. And I think you're right to point out kind of the journey the Commission has been on since maybe 5 or 6 years ago, because it seems to me like the kind of football index scandal that happened sort of under the watch of the Commission, if you like, was the turning point here, and obviously led to the kind of departure of the former CEO Neil MacArthur, and since then we've had Andrew Rhodes in charge, and they've taken a much more kind of hard line approach, I would argue, to regulating the sector and certainly enforcement. And it's quite interesting, that approach, because obviously the government has kind of been in a mess throughout this entire period, as we know, because the gambling review keeps getting pushed back and back and back, and nobody really wants to take responsibility for it. So the Commission really are acting of their own accord here, and this is the method they've chosen to regulate the sector. And I just wonder how operators feel about that. I mean, like you were right to point out, it probably has taken its toll in the short term, but I wonder if actually eventually they'll be grateful for the kind of the clarity, like, instead of just a slap on the wrist, it's kind of like there's a lot firm line in the sand now that they know, they're not allowed to get away with this any longer. And that was, a few people might argue that was overdue. But Nico, so you obviously work, in the industry. Like you say, ICE is coming up in the UK. What do you hear about operating in the UK? Is it as disastrous as people make out at the moment?
So first of all, holding the compliance seat is usually not a seat you admire to take, especially if there are no fines which actually hit your balance sheets, right? Because then your management is just, okay, why should we talk about safer gambling? Why should we consider AML checks, blah, blah, blah? Why should we just take away a portion of our revenue, right? It's pretty simple. So that's why the kind of regulated business used to have no interest in following the rules. Then as soon as actually hard fines hit your balance sheets, then management might actually start listening to you. And this is what I'm hearing from the industry, especially from the guys and girls holding the AML and being responsible for AML, etc. As well. So this is the one side of the story. First of all, we all need to take into account, and process our business alongside the underlying laws, which are pretty simple in Europe, in the UK as well. You can look them up. Then, what we should also take into consideration, if the margins and the kind of requirements of a regulated business are so tough to operate in, and the margins get so small, then of course this forces players to actually join the black markets as well. And just remembering what the Betting and Gaming Council found out, that especially during the World Cup of 2022, you can still enter a non-regulated website, and this obviously happened in the UK. A rise from 80,000 visits to 250,000 visits. This actually takes even more, revenue away from the companies who are actually willing to work alongside the underlying laws as well. And as of now, from an outsider perspective, sometimes it just sounds like, the KSA in the Netherlands, they are fining operators or non-licensed operators as well. The UK Gambling Commission is fining companies as well. I'm pretty sure we're just hitting the top of an iceberg. Just remember when Entain got hit by roughly 14 or 15 million pounds for allowing people living on social welfare, allowing them to gamble with 250,000 pounds. I don't know how social welfare in the UK works, but in Germany it's a little bit different. So for sure, I couldn't afford like spending 250k on gambling websites, but maybe it's just different in the UK, as said. But coming back to the point, fines for sure help the people in charge of AML and compliance to actually have a word within the management, and I'm pretty sure that we will see even bigger fines in the UK and in all the regulated markets as well. Because as of now, we have not seen any fines in Germany as of now. And I'm pretty sure that especially as the GGL, the underlying authority in Germany, they also will make sure and stand tall that they take the regulated market pretty serious, and then we will see fines as well in Germany.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember as well that there's quite a significant delay with these fines. So most of the fines that we saw last year sort of seem to, I'm not sure of the specifics, but I think they generally referred to actions that were taken in sort of 2021 or before. So I guess it's going to be a slow process for the industry to come to terms with the fact that, yes, these fines are getting more serious. There may be threats to your license and so on. So I think you're quite right, Nico. This may well be the tip of an iceberg. It will probably get worse before it gets better. But as things have changed in the last, certainly, and since 2022, with that record number of fines issued, I think in coming years, people will start to, operators that is, will start to take this all a little bit more seriously.
I remember saying something very similar to that in probably 2019, Conor, when all the fines were relating to 2016 and 2015.
Yeah.
And here we are 4 years later, and not a great deal has changed, but we'll see. We have to give these companies the benefit of the doubt, don't we? Right, we're going to come back to the UK a little bit later in the show, but now to go somewhere a little more glamorous, some people might argue, and that is New York, where, of course, iGaming Next will be in March with our New York event. And our conference is going to focus predominantly on online gambling. But the talk of the town at the moment is land-based gambling, and particularly these huge kind of casino venues that could be getting built in New York with licenses up for grabs at the moment. And Las Vegas Sands reported their Q4 results today. And in my opinion, the most interesting comments were about their bid for a New York casino license. Nico, I know this is kind of a topic you've been following fairly closely, simply because it would be kind of such a game changer for these casino operators. I can talk a bit more about the story, but do you want to maybe share some of your thoughts initially?
Yeah, so first of all, what we're seeing, regulation in California is, as of now, not going to happen. Yeah, the latest battleground where all the crazy numbers are coming from has been the sports betting in New York. Of course, the margin in sports betting ain't that high like in casino. So as of now, they will be opening up, or there are at least 2 or 3 licenses to actually open up a casino, especially on Times Square, which is pretty much the heart of New York, and the numbers we are seeing is just crazy. Jay-Z's Rocker Entertainment are bidding for one of these licenses which are for sale. Now, Las Vegas Sands are bidding for a license, and we're speaking about big numbers like 2 billion and 5 billion. So hopefully, this won't be a bubble about to be burst. But especially, we are just and only talking about companies and or private investors with pretty deep pockets. So, with Las Vegas Sands as being considered as the wealthiest company within our industry, besides the Swedish brand and close to our heart, Evolution. So for sure, we will just see big numbers, which nobody of us can actually dream of as of now. And as you already pointed out, Jake, it will be crazy, and probably one or two businesses will probably put their heart and their balance sheets on the line, and fingers crossed we won't see a big aftermath.
Yeah, it's going to be fiercely competitive, I think. And just to talk a little bit more about those numbers, so it's going to cost $500 million just for a license for one of these New York land-based casinos. But the reason, obviously, operators are desperate to get one is because there's not really kind of land-based gambling in New York as there are in other parts of the US. It's one of the strongest areas of the US in terms of international tourism, which is obviously a kind of tried and tested Las Vegas Sands business model, considering their properties in Macau and Singapore. And it's also home to 23 million people. It's a metropolitan area. So, yeah, if you can get a Times Square site or a Staten Island site or anything else for a casino, you're going to be absolutely raking it in. Because the other thing to note is that with only 3 licenses available, there's not going to be huge competition either. You're going to have not a monopoly, but certainly a hell of a share of the potential revenue there. And Rob Goldstein, the Las Vegas chief executive, has said that they would be open to spending up to $5 billion on the resort. And they said, this isn't just going to be a casino with some slot machines. This is going to be a fully integrated resort. So if you've ever seen kind of the Marina Bay Sands Hotel in Singapore, it's absolutely incredible. I don't think there's quite the retail space for that in New York, but it will certainly be more than just a casino. He said there'll be like a conference center, multiple restaurants, a theater, obviously a huge hotel, that goes without saying, a spa. And yeah, it's basically to drive tourism in the area and also increase kind of jobs for locals. That's their business case for it. But yeah, this isn't an opportunity to be sniffed at, and they're kind of willing to spend whatever it takes, is the general message. Conor, what do you think about that? Are you looking forward to our New York shows in future years, where we can just hop over the road and pop into a Las Vegas Sands casino?
Well, when you said conference centre, I thought, well, where better?
Yeah.
Next 2028, for example. It's a land-based casino is basically the only thing that New York doesn't have already. No, it's the city that never sleeps, the city that has everything, except somewhere to play casino games, and that's what they're looking to bring. I mean, we've seen, the government in New York sort of really trying to bolster its budget using the sports betting and the very high rate of tax they've got on that there, and that seems to be going quite well for them, seems to be generating quite a lot of revenue for the public purse. This certainly can't hurt to get $500 million in, well, I suppose 1.5 billion across all 3 licenses for the license, and then all the tax, and on top of that, as you say, the increase in tourism, because of course the one thing that Times Square is missing is more tourists. That's what it needs. I think it's no surprise that Sands have suggested they're willing to spend up to 5 billion. If you've ever seen an episode of Grand Designs and people building their dream homes, you know for a fact that they will go over that budget. It will take longer than they think, and it will cost more than they think. But
yeah,
at the end of the day, like you say, they've got the expertise. You look at the Marina Bay Sands and the quality of that property. I've never visited, sadly, although one day. And you can see the very serious approach they take to property development and kind
Yeah,
of doing things at the cutting edge. And I think
yeah.
that's what
That's a good point, though. Costs can easily spiral on a project like this, and I think the analysts on the conference call today were a little bit wary of that, and they kind of said, are you sure you want to spend that much money? And Las Vegas Sands said, we're not in the habit of investing in projects that we don't think will be profitable. And their chief operating officer said we wouldn't be interested in New York if we didn't think the returns are there. And it's another interesting point that Las Vegas Sands obviously is one of the few casino companies in the US to have completely ignored online gambling and online sports betting. Which, as we know, is a kind of losing game for operators at the moment. Many of them are struggling for profitability, and it's costing a fortune. So, maybe they've saved all of that additional capital because they knew this was coming down the line, and they were keeping it for a rainy day, as they say.
Yeah, it looks
Could
like
pay off.
Looks from the outside like quite a risk-averse business. They know what they're good at. They know what their strengths are. They know
Yeah,
the potential of land-based casino and integrated resorts, and that's what they are sticking to. And fair play to them.
yep, exactly. I'm sure if anybody will make it a success, it will probably be them. Okay, coming back to the UK a little bit. Today is a momentous day because it basically kicks off Q4 reporting season. Pierre's favourite time of year. I'm sure he'll be on the weekly news throughout February. But yeah, it officially starts today with Rank Group and BetMGM as well, who've provided a bit of a business update. But basically, people have been trying to guess and forecast as to what Q4 will hold for operators. And a tipster company in the UK called City Bet Club said that they were expecting a very poor Q4 period because World Cup results weren't all they cracked up to be. It didn't provide the boost that operators were expecting. And also, obviously, all of the additional things we've talked about, like, stricter affordability measures, the threat of enforcement action, could make it a pretty miserable quarter, especially for UK licensed operators. Obviously, a lot of the Q4 results are still to come, but we have had some trading updates before now, including from Kindred Group and AAA.
Mm-hmm.
And reading those, it's pretty easy to see how CBC came up with this prediction, because Kindred Group, when was it? January the 13th, basically issued a profit warning saying that Q4 results would be materially lower than they had expected, and that the World Cup was actually kind of detrimental to their traditional calendar of sporting events rather than beneficial. And that's particularly interesting for Kindred because France is a massive, massive market for them. I think possibly second biggest market in terms of users, and France got all the way to the final. So if they're having a nightmare tournament, what does that say for the other operators that are exposed there? But yeah, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this, guys.
Well, it was surprising to me based on my own experience of betting on the World Cup, Jake, because the bookmaker I use, privately owned bookmaker based in Stoke-on-Trent, that was all profit for them as far as I was concerned. I think they made upwards of £50 or £60 from me, so that was pretty good. I think Denise will be building a new wing on her house with the spoils. So I was quite surprised because the World Cup's like impossible to bet on. You never know. I mean, who could have said what was it 3-3 in extra time and Argentina wins on penalties? Who was betting on that?
Yeah, we won't be giving you a new column to provide your betting tips, Connor. That's for sure.
No, well, the way I do it, Jake, is I turn to the person next to me and I say, "What do you think the score's going to be?" And they say 2-1, and I put a fiver on 2-1, and then more often than not, I win. But
Yeah.
not in the World Cup. Didn't work for me, so I was quite surprised by that. I suppose, Nico, it's quite possibly related to the story that you brought us about this massive influx of customers in the UK going to the unregulated market. I think that, affordability checks are possibly a part of that, but then again, for casual bettors who make up sort of the majority of the market in terms of player numbers, it doesn't seem to me that most of those would have been affected by affordability checks. I suppose it's conceivable that more attractive acquisition offers from those grey market, or rather unlicensed operators, attracted a great deal of people. Maybe they're doing some very clever online marketing and getting around, social media rules for advertising unlicensed betting operations. But I think sometimes these offshore operators are able to offer sort of 200 or 300% deposit bonuses, and as far as I can tell, that's not permitted in the UK. Anything over 100% seems to be impossible to come by. Maybe that's part of it, but it was surprising to me, to say the least.
So just picking up one point. First of all, it's good seeing you, Conor, once again. Although you, for sure, and there are rumors going around that, of course, you had the 2.1 win of Saudi Arabia, the almighty Saudi Arabia against Argentina. Totally correct. So you are still here. Why Neymar needed to, explore some other verticals to get some money into his pockets, and that's why he started the Twitch channel, advertising some online casinos. So as said, it's always good that you're still grounded, although you're pretty rich, running around in Manchester and asking people what color of. So what color is your Bugatti, right? So that's good. That's good. So first of all, thanks that things are still like they are. But as already pointed out, that's always the competition we need to have in mind when we're tightening up the markets. And numbers don't lie. If from 80,000 visits per month, it goes up to 250,000 visits per month, there's something underlying. And this is pretty much based on the offerings of the black markets as well.
Yeah, that was a hell of a segue, Nico. I wasn't totally sure where you were going with that, but you're right. It's good that Conor's able to keep his feet on the ground after winning so much money during the World Cup from Saudi Arabia to beat Argentina.
£55 I won the other day. Shots for everyone in that bar, I can assure you.
But no, amidst all of that, I think you're both right to raise really interesting points about market exposure. And whether people are active either in just regulated markets or regulating markets, as some operators like to call them, because two of the businesses to provide trading updates, Kindred Group and 888, are very much regulated mix, right? And 888 said there was a 5% reduction in online revenues for Q4. So again, disappointing, missed expectations. They said in line with expectations. But Regulus Partners pointed out that most of the major kind of uplift from World Cup was in LATAM and regulating territories down there. So if your business isn't active in those markets, you're not going to benefit from the uptick that some others are. And I think that's kind of what we see playing out in the numbers, certainly the pre-Q4 trading updates at least.
Yeah, no surprise to see, especially in Argentina, there was probably a solid uptick there. Then again, there would have been outside of winning, so who knows? But there was some. I would definitely recommend people go and look at this, these predictions from City Bet Club that our journalist Sonia Lindenberg reported on. There was some interesting analysis in there. So I think Triple Eight released some stats from its William Hill brand. And the metric it used was player user days. So I guess how many times a player logged on and placed a bet, during that period. And it said that online player days at William Hill were up 22% compared to Euro 2020. Now, that sounds fairly positive, but City Bet Club points out that the World Cup had 25% more matches than Euro 2020 and didn't have the same competition of a heavy summer sporting schedule. And so that sort of like-for-like comparison doesn't necessarily work very well. So a 22% increase in player days was seen as quite disappointing by them. But lots of interesting analysis in there and much more detail in the write-up on our website.
Yeah, excellent, Conor. Well done for pointing that out. And we'll be keeping a close eye on this, kind of whether this trend does develop into Q4. We've got Entain on the 1st of February and then Flutter a month later on the 2nd of March. So, yeah, those are the kind of big guns, aren't they, that will kind of set the pace for the rest of the market, you'd imagine.
Yeah.
All right, we don't have too much longer left today, so we'll probably wrap things up shortly. But as it's Nico's first pod of 2023, and it's still January just, you've not managed to escape, Nico. I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask you for an industry prediction for 2023, because that's what the audience have been screaming for since we started recording today, I'm sure. So what have you got for us? Lay it on the line.
So first of all, depending on the market, right? First of all, depending on the market, in Germany, for sure, we will see more regulated companies, but I'm pretty sure that's just boring stuff, with respect to, each and everybody knows what's about to come. So one thing I just want to point out, we will for sure see one big giant fall. Whoever this might be, so we will just see one big company, probably a tier one operator, which will just fall in between the cracks due to the spendings they already had, and based on the investor relations climate, which is about to change due to high inflation rates, due to probably a recession, and that's why I'm pretty sure one or two or one of the big investors will pull the plug of funding one of the big operations. So whoever this might be, probably one in the US, but we will for sure see one big giant being either taking over or just falling through the cracks.
Very interesting, Nico. There you go. You heard it here first. A giant will fall in 2023. I'm not going to ask you to name any names, Nico, so don't panic. I think that's a good prediction and one we'll keep track of throughout the rest of the year. All right, I'm going to wrap things up there. So before we say goodbye, is there anything else you'd like to add, Conor and Nico?
No, I think that was pretty comprehensive. Lots to think about this week.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll be back next week at the same time, of course. And I think that'll be our last weekly news before ICE. I'm not sure whether we'll do one live from the conference the Thursday afterwards. That might be quite an interesting experiment. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe live from the pub. Nico, thank you so much for joining me today. Great to have you back. And Conor, good having you as always. Just before we go, I want to say thank you to our audience and also to our sponsor, Playson. Yeah, we'll be back same time next week.
Good to see you guys. Thanks again.